Hey, Dan Passarelli here. Happy weekend. All right, we made another one. Yes, okay. Going into the weekend, I don't know, maybe I got a little philosophical here or something, but I started thinking about something that, well, maybe some people think is boring, but I don't. The laws of supply and demand. And what got me thinking about it is I saw just a headline that said Bitcoin soars above 61,000, and I've studied up a fair amount on crypto, traded Bitcoin, even had a mine at one point. Um, but it's trading over $61,000. Why? And it's really just because of demand. And part of that demand comes from the ETFs that were approved and then the futures. People have to buy them to hold in these funds and such. And so there's just demand that creates value. And I guess that's really true for any asset. Another one, take Apple stock. So Apple had a really big earnings beat today. And one of the things that was announced around that time is that they're initiating a huge stock buyback program, the biggest in the history of the stock market, apparently. Holy cow. And so when Apple jumped up 12 bucks, 7% today, I looked at it and I figure, well, it's probably not going to come back down for a while because there's that demand there. I mean, it won't come back down very much until all the shares that are to be purchased by Apple Corporation get purchased. It's demand that will keep that stock higher. And I also was thinking about the market in general. And yesterday's video is very contrary to the unemployment number that came out this morning, interestingly enough. I was looking at a bunch of numbers and sharing them in yesterday's video about how the economy is doing really well. And lo and behold, when you know that non-farm payrolls comes out at 175,000 versus 238,000 estimate. And unemployment rate was a tenth higher than expected and a tenth higher than prior as well. So bad news. All that bad news drove the market up. Well, we're at about 1.3% as I record this about an hour and a half before the close. And if you think about it, really, that's kind of weird, right? Because we have other numbers, including other employment figures, are contrary to this. But also, the important thing is that the inflation rate is still too high by the Fed's liking. And they need to get that down. Now, when you have a bad economy, which this non-farm payrolls figure would indicate, although other figures don't indicate that, when you have a bad economy and you have inflation, that's something called stagflation, stagnant economy plus inflation. And that's sort of the worst of all cases. And it seems like the market must love stagflation. I mean, obviously they don't. That's the worst case scenario. So why is the market heading higher? I mean, the narrative for this is that maybe there'll be a rate cut, but we don't necessarily need a rate cut unless the economy's doing poorly. And if the economy's doing poorly, then that's not good for stocks. So in a lot of ways, the whole thing doesn't make sense. But in another way, it doesn't matter if it makes sense because that demand is there, whether that demand is rational or maybe there's big forces out there who are seeing different things than we are, or maybe it's just a lot of confused retail traders buying that could end up left holding the bag. It doesn't really matter what the reason is. All our job really is to do is to find and try and figure out where that demand or supply comes from and trade ahead of that. It's the psychology of markets. So there's something to think about for the weekend. I know I will be. This is Dan Passarelli, Trade Smart.